Hello and welcome to the special support section of Melee's Turnwheel, where today we're going to be taking a look at Gerik, Marisa, Tethys, Ewan, and Saleh from Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones. I am going to be honest with you guys. This might end up being a short one. I don't know. I don't feel like I have very much to say about these guys. I'm just being fully transparent. Not to, not to, what's the word? I guess, I don't want to give the impression that I'm not going to do my best. I would like to present these characters. I do like several of these characters. And even the ones that I think are more boring, I don't think are terrible. I just don't find this whole squad to be all that endearing, personally, or interesting or fun to talk about. So yeah, let's just see how it goes. Let's start with Gerik. He's the man of the hour. These are all like his mercenaries, like people that he works with. It's kind of unclear to me what his relationship with Saleh is, or Ewan. I think maybe that they like join up with his mercenary company at the end of the game or something. I don't know. There's a CG with all of them together in the credits. That's all I know. But anyway, so starting off, Gerik, he actually has 6 support partners. This is the first time we're seeing this in a while. He supports with Inez, Tethys, Marisa, Saleh, Joshua, and Ross. The Inez support is pretty good. We find out Gerik's backstory. He tells us a little bit about how he's not a mercenary because he enjoys fighting or being a mercenary. He basically signed up to be a mercenary so that he could protect a friend that he worked closely with. And unfortunately, the friend did end up dying. But even after that happened, at that point, he had made new friends and he wanted to keep fighting to protect them and, protect them the day after that. And kind of one thing led to another, and he just ended up continuing to do what he had to do, to help the people that he cared about. He didn't feel right just turning his back on people. We can infer that maybe now he feels that way about Tethys. It's a little bit unclear about what he's still doing. This is also something that gets contradicted in other places too, because Gerik talks a little bit about how, I don't know if contradicted is the right word. It feels a little bit inconsistent to me, where in other supports, Gerik is like, oh, well, the life of being a mercenary is that someone you're friends with one day can be your enemy the next day. And that's true. But it stands, it makes you question, if he knows that being a mercenary might end up pitting him against people that he cares about. That seems a little contradictory to me. I don't fully get it. He does call Inez a dandy in this support, which is a pretty funny line. Inez is like, "Did you just call me a dandy?" And then Gerik just moves on, doesn't acknowledge it at all, which is pretty funny. I think it's fine. I actually don't love Inez in this support, but that's not really. We'll do his episode another time. Yeah, I don't have much else to add about this one. He's cool. Gerik is just kind of like a chill guy. He's fun. He's nice. I like his vibes. He's got good vibes. But yeah, I guess we'll just move on to Tethys. I'm going to keep it real with you guys. I have absolutely nothing to say about the support for Gerik. The only thing that I will say is that they talk a little bit in the A support about, I think the B support, it comes up for Tethys, but Gerik in the A support talks about a knight that he had an encounter with, which, first of all, I'm curious to know who this knight was, if it's a character that we know from the game or if it's just some random guy. I'm obviously glad that they don't answer that explicitly, but it's fun to speculate on, could this have been like Dusel, or, could it have been someone from Renee, maybe? We never find out what country they're from even. I don't think even Gerik knows. But it's fun to think about. Who could this have been? But the more relevant thing to what I want to talk about is, Gerik talks about how, this knight let him live after a battle. And that was something that, stuck with him, resonated with him. And he learned to be calmer, essentially, and to stop rushing in headfirst, and that has led to a more successful career as a mercenary. Has possibly been the reason that he's been alive for so long, is because this knight, taught him this lesson, and then let him walk away from it alive. And he and Tethys both talk a little bit about how they want to go forward with their lives and be inspirations for other people in the same way that people in their lives have been inspirations for them. And the only reason I bring that up is because first of all, I think it's a nice, a nice little moment between the two, but also I think this adds some additional context to the Ross support, which when we get there, I'm going to basically gloss over since we already talked about it from Ross's side. So I guess I'll just, the only thing I'll say about that here is that I think that, with this additional context from the Tethys support, it's easy to see why Gerik takes such a shine to Ross, this idea of like him wanting to leave a mark on other people in the same way is pretty cool. And I think I think the Ross support, just based on pure vibes and his like dialogue and interactions with the other person, I think Ross is up there for me. I do quite like it, but I don't have anything interesting to say about it. You're gonna hear me say that a lot this episode, because most of these supports I really just read and were like, yep, that was fine. That was a pretty alright support, but I don't have much to say about it. But yeah, I'm just going to skip over the Ross support in that case. Let me just reread it real quick just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, there's nothing. It's just a fine support. Okay, what's next? The Marisa support. Oh my god. No, wait, we're going to save that. We're going to save that for later. Joshua. The Joshua support is cool. I like their paired ending here. Gerik and Joshua, like, they become, like, Gerik becomes his right-hand man, basically, because Joshua, we found out last episode, Joshua is the Prince of Johanna, so Joshua goes to rule over Johanna, and I guess Gerik becomes, like, his strongest, most trusted lieutenant or something like that, so that's what their paired ending is, but the actual support itself is like, mostly fine. I like how Gerik is able to immediately figure out what's going on with Joshua's coin trick. That's pretty cool. He's sharp. I like that. It's fun to see him be observant. It's just, they're both very, like, witty, intelligent guys, and it's fun to see them go back and forth. That's really what the support boils down to. It's entertaining to read. I don't have much to chew on about it though, so I'm gonna move on. I have a little bit more to say about it when we get to Joshua's episode eventually, but not that much still. Okay, Saleh. Now this is a good support. I like Saleh a fair bit. We're gonna get to his supports later, and I do honestly quite like them. The Gerik Saleh support is one of my favorites. Honestly, I mostly like it more for Saleh, which we'll talk about. I don't know. Have I been saying Saleh up to this point, or have I been saying Saleh? I think it's Saleh. But yeah, I like the support a fair bit. So these two apparently have some kind of history together, where they've known each other for a while. Again, I'm not entirely sure what their relationship is. It seems like Gerik just happened to be in the area of Caer Pelin at one point. And I don't know what the context of that was. It never comes up. But he was there at one point, and he met Saleh. He met the village elder, whose name is I don't think it actually comes up in the support. In a few supports, Saleh mentions that the elder's name is Dara, which I don't think was ever mentioned in the main story. But I'll probably refer to as Dara from here on. So you met Dara. What I really enjoy about this support is that they really bounce off of each other as friends very well. Their dynamic is very entertaining. I enjoy seeing them just kind of be witty with each other, banter. Saleh, as we're going to see in some of his supports, is very serious and stoic. And it's not like he isn't with Gerik. It still is very much the case that he's kind of a quiet, more reserved guy. But he seems a little bit more lighthearted. He's like, he's like a little bit more receptive to jokes and things like that. And Gerik also has a whole scene with him where he talks about how he needs to, like, get his grandma something, like a present or something like that. And Saleh is, like, open to that. He's open to Gerik sort of giving him advice on how to buy presents for people, which is just very cute. I enjoy seeing them together, and I think that they have a good relationship. The ace support is kind of meant to be the meat and potatoes here, where Saleh, I guess Saleh was the one who killed Gerik's friend. I don't know the context of that. I have no idea why Saleh would have been fighting against Gerik in any capacity. I mean, maybe Saleh used to work as a mercenary. If that's true, it never comes up in any of his other supports, but it is possible. And the two kind of hash that out. This is kind of where I mentioned earlier that Gerik says like, oh, well, that's just kind of what being a mercenary is. You're fighting with people, an enemy one day, friend the next day, etc. Zaba was apparently the friend's name. My friend Zaba died by your act, that much is true, and at that moment I could think of nothing but avenging him. But after that, you saved my life. We became friends. That's the truth of it, isn't it? So it seems like they just have a very complicated relationship, and Gerik, doesn't want to be bogged down in, holding grudges. I think living life as a mercenary has given him the perspective that, like, you can't hold grudges because someone who you previously hated might turn out to be your best friend the next day. And I think that sort of like go with the flow, laid back mentality. And I guess not laid back, but like, I just like calm and relaxed, I guess would be the best way. That carries over through a lot of different interactions with others. And I like it. Gerik's a fun character. I haven't had a lot to say about a lot of his supports, and I think that's because it's not because I don't like Gerik as a character. I just think like most of his supports speak for themselves. They're entertaining to read, or they speak to kind of like his nature, which is like very calm, very collected. And just a chill guy, which is pretty easy to see on the tin. So there's not really a whole lot for me to bite into. But that's not bad by any means. I think he's still a fun character. His Marisa support is the last one that we haven't gotten to yet, and again, same thing really. It's just Gerik trying to get Marisa to open up a little bit, or lighten up a little bit, I guess I should say. And I think. Here's what I want to know. I don't know what the deal is with Gerik's like romantic, what the romantic dynamics here are, because it doesn't seem like, when we first meet them, it seems like both Gerik and Marisa, both Tethys and Marisa have feelings for Gerik. That comes up pretty strongly implied in the in their recruitment conversation. But then, in the supports, it's like almost stated outright. The Tethys and Marisa support, it's almost stated outright. Then, but in Gerik's Tethys support, it seems like, he's already basically in a relationship with her. Like, he just kind of drops the fact that he loves her very casually as if they're already dating. But I guess that could have been his idea of, like, telling Tethys for the first time. It doesn't seem like that's what's being said there, because Tethys' reaction to it is like, she's excited and happy, but it could just be like, oh, you're so sweet or whatever. And then but in the Marisa support, he can end up with Marisa as well, so I don't fully get it. I mean, Marisa is clearly like head over heels for him. We're gonna go into Marisa next. We're gonna segue into that, so I think that makes sense as a transition point. Marisa, I don't. I gotta formulate my thoughts about Marisa. Just to start off with this support, I will say that this is one of her better supports. I do like it, just because she's so clearly trying to push herself out of her comfort zone, which is fun to see. Marisa is a very stoic, serious character. Similar to Saleh, but unlike Saleh, it's played more as a gag, and her being in situations that she doesn't entirely feel comfortable in is more of a common conflict in some of her supports, this being one of them, because she Gerik's trying to get her to lighten up, be more sociable. Marisa doesn't really have any interest in that, but she asks Gerik, like, is that what you want? Do you like women that are sociable? Because she's clearly smitten with him, is not making any attempt to hide that. And Gerik says, I mean, yeah, I guess so. And Marisa starts trying to be more sociable, and it's very funny. What her idea of being sociable is just like, like cheerily asking people like how their day was or whatever. But yeah, that's really all there is to this one. It's just like the B and A supports are basically just nothing. They're funny, but there's not much substance there. So I don't I don't have much to say about this one. Marisa, broadly speaking, just like talking about her as a character overall, she's like more interesting than characters like Garcia and Gilliam and Ross and Mulder to me. Like, I think she's more interesting than any of the characters that we talked about in the first episode. But in a way, this is gonna sound really weird, and I'm sorry to any Marisa fans that are gonna feel like I'm really stretching here. But like, this is genuinely how I feel. Ross and Garcia, and well, it was mostly okay. So maybe not Ross. Ross, I think I like more than her, but like Garcia, Gilliam, and Mulder all being so boring is like the fact that I can look at all three of these guys and be like, these are some of the least interesting characters in the entire series. That by itself is kind of interesting, right? Like it's a mark of, I guess like a mark of shame or something worth talking about them. To say like, oh yeah, these guys suck and I hate them. I don't think they're very interesting characters. Marisa is just like one step above that. So I can't say that she's incredibly boring like those guys are, but like she's not interesting enough to be like a fun character to me. So she kind of exists in like this weird valley where she's not boring enough to be interesting and she's not actually interesting enough to be interesting. So like what the hell am I supposed to do with this? I don't think she's a very fun or interesting character. Her Tana support I'm literally just going to skip because it's so boring. I have no opinion on the Tana support whatsoever. I think the Tethys support is a little bit better. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention she supports with Tana, Tethys, Gerik, Joshua, and Colm. And we're skipping over the Tana support, like I said. The Colm support we've already talked about. I think this is like similar to the Gerik support in that I think it's funny. And they play her being super, stone faced and serious for comedy. But I think it lands better in the Gerik support than it does here. I don't dislike the support. It's fine. But it's just kind of, it's whatever. I don't have much of an opinion about it. I'm really trying to come up with something to say about the Joshua support. I actually think the Joshua support is pretty good for Joshua. I think it's so funny how he's like, I love gambling. I love gambling. Gambling is my biggest love in life. He just keeps saying that shit in like all of his supports, and it's really funny. But Marisa is just like there. Marissa's the straight man in this situation, and that's like incredibly boring. She just doesn't have anything noteworthy or interesting to say, in my opinion. I mean, she does threaten to kill Joshua, I guess, when Joshua challenges her to a duel. And Marisa assumes that he means to the death because I guess that's just how seriously she takes fighting. But that's not like, that doesn't do much for me, in my opinion. The Tethys support I find to be pretty interesting. I think it's because Tethys plays into her stoicism so well, because she's very like fanciful and she has like all these fun ideas for conversation, and the fact that Marisa is like barely taking the bait like doesn't deter her at all. She's just gonna keep rambling. She's gonna keep yapping. Tethys is a yapper, and it's very funny to see her just yap at Marisa, and Marissa's just kind of there along for the ride. I like them talking about Marissa's history. There's a funny bit here where we find out that her father put blunt swords at Marissa's sides while she slept so that she could train to not roll over in her sleep, which is fucking deranged and hysterical all at the same time. I love it. And then Tethys tells her a little bit about dancing and what dancing means to her, what she feels dancing can accomplish. And then the A support, I like where they start going with the ace support, with them saying like, oh, what's what do you want to be reborn as if you were to be reincarnated as something? Both Tethys and Marisa say like, it's like hard to imagine being someone other than myself, because we are who we are, and it's it's a little bit of a boring answer to that question, I guess. I wish one of them had just played ball a little bit and said penguin or something. I don't fucking know, but whatever, it's fine. It doesn't matter. But then the back half of the ace support devolves into them like doing a whole bit about which about them being rivals and loving Gerik, which feels a little bit I don't like that they I don't know if undermines the right word, but I feel like they were going somewhere with that, and it just kind of feels like they sideline it to talk about how they both are in love with Gerik, which I'm not a big fan of. Okay. I've alluded to this a couple of times, and I'm still formulating my thoughts on it. I still have like plenty of the game left to go. I still have a lot of supports left to read. But I'm gonna like just kind of say where my head's at, so I don't just keep making snide comments and letting people like figure out where my head is at. I do not like the way that this game treats its female characters very much. And Fire Emblem, let me tell you this, Fire Emblem is a series with a long history of not writing women very well. And there are some games that are definitely worse about it than others. Probably the most notorious is, of course, Shadows of Valentia, and to a lesser extent Gaiden, but especially Shadows of Valentia, since that game has more story content in general. And that's not to say that Shadows of Valentia is a bad game or poorly written or whatever. I really like Shadows of Valentia. We're going to talk about that when we get there. And I don't want to get too off topic. Obviously, this is a support episode. I don't want to talk about the games at large. But it just, like, it's something that keeps popping into my head. It started with Erica, and then it started, like, I started thinking about how, it feels like you get to play matchmaker with all of the female characters, and you get, like, half of the female characters in this game have, like, 3 different paired endings that you can, like, pair people off with, and it felt weird. There was something, like, nagging at the back of my head, and then I read this support, and I was like, man, they just really do not... they can't even do a fucking support of it's the, what is it called, the Bechdel test? Is that what it's called? Or is that the fucking no, that's the Turing test that I'm thinking of. The Bechdel test, I think, is the one, right? It's kind of a meme because it's not, like, actually a good metric for judging how well a story handles women, mostly because even if they pass the Bechdel test, it's not like a get out of jail free card for writing your women badly. But they can't even pass the Bechdel test, is what I'm trying to say. These two can't even go for a whole support without bringing up Gerik, which is a little sad to me. I think they deserve better than that. But anyway, I'm gonna get off my high horse. This is probably gonna be something that I bring up in the wrap up episode, and then however many more times it's relevant with Erica, I guess. But it's not something that I plan to spend a lot more time on. Until I get to that point. I just felt like I kept making allusions to it, and it felt better to just, like, say outright what I was thinking instead of just being, like, mysterious about it, I guess. Anyway, that's Marisa. I didn't even remember what fucking character we were talking about. Yeah, it's Marisa. She's fine. I don't have an opinion on her. We're going to move on to Tethys. Tethys supports with Ewan, Marisa, Archer, Gerik, and Renak. Guys... This is dire. This is so bad, guys. These supports are so fucking bad. The Archer support we already talked about, and it's, like, weird, and I don't dislike it. I don't think it's, like, really going for what it seems to be implying in places. I think it's just, like, a localization thing. Or just maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm reading uncomfortable themes into places that they shouldn't be. Maybe I'm the problem here. But even just past that, I don't think it's a very interesting support for Tethys' character. I think the best you can say about the Archer support for Tethys is that she seems to have a very consistent, I say very consistent, but, like, she has the support with Ewan, right? And she's Ewan's older sister. And she seems to have, like, a doting mother kind of vibe to her, which doesn't come out very often. It comes out with Ewan, but then it also comes out a little bit here with Archer, which is, like, neat. I think you can tie that into her, her backstory, which we're going to talk about in the Gerik support. But otherwise, I don't have anything to say about the Archer support. The Renak support is fucking awful, guys. It's not terrible, right? Like, I didn't hate reading it, but it's just boring, right? Like, nothing happens. It doesn't feel like anything is accomplished in it. I didn't learn anything new about Renak or about Tethys. I'm just gonna fucking skip that one too. I'm sorry, guys. If you want to go read these, be my guest. We already talked about the Marisa support. I already mentioned that I think Tethys is a yapper, and I like her in the support because it's fun to see her bounce off of Marissa's, just kind of, like, not giving her an inch in like, conversationally, and her just, like, rolling with it. That's pretty fun. The Gerik support, again, we already talked about this one. The main thing that I want to draw attention to for this is that this is the support where we get Tethys' backstory. Namely how, I'm trying to remember, like, something happened to their parents, abandoned by your parents. Yeah. So they were abandoned by their parents. And she just had to take care of Ewan. She had to find ways to survive. Eventually she locked in and said, like, we can't keep living like this. Like, I need to do what I need to do to take care of myself and to take care of my brother. And she learned how to dance from a street performer. And ever since then, she's been doing her best to provide for Ewan. And it's just, like, it's a sad tale that she doesn't like talking about it. It's very obvious, like, even to Gerik, who she has, like, pretty explicitly has romantic feelings for, doesn't even open up about it to him until the B support, and then after she tells Gerik, she goes out of her way to be like, please don't tell anybody else about this. I don't want other people knowing. Which I think is like, I don't have like a lot of like thoughts about that necessarily. Like I don't have anything that I would add on to that. I guess what I mean to say is I think that I don't have a thesis statement about what that says about Tethys' character, but I do think it's noteworthy and a little sad. Like she put so much hard work in, and she doesn't want people to like look down on her from coming from a life of strife and of what's the word, of poverty, and I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for here, but I think it says something about Tethys's feelings about herself and about how her concern about how other people view her, which doesn't really come out in any of her other supports, honestly. This idea of like her not wanting to be looked at by other people in that way. It never gets addressed anywhere else, which I think is missed potential. I think it could have been pretty cool. Okay, so the only new support here that we haven't already talked about is the Ewan support. I actually really like Tethys in this support because you can tell that she's clearly trying to be like a good role model for Ewan, or I guess like, scold him and teach him a lesson the way that a mother would. But she clearly can't help herself because we don't know exactly how old she is. We know that she was still a kid when she was abandoned by her parents. So there's not a, we can assume that she's definitely at least a little bit older than Ewan. We don't know by exactly how much. But with that said, it seems like she's still pretty young insofar that she still thinks that what Ewan is doing is pretty funny. Which is just a nice little piece of characterization for her. Overall, this is just like a good support for them bonding. Like Tethys and Ewan clearly care about each other. Ewan is a sarcastic little shit. And I love him for that. We're going to get to him. Ewan is great. And he is, but like Tethys is one of the few people that he like is just completely genuine with for the most part. And that's dipping a little bit into Ewan, who we're going to get into next. But I think Tethys is pretty good here too. I think the fact that she's just like so straightforward and honest with him says a lot about the relationship that they have, which is given additional context by the Gerik support. Like they have been all that they've had. Like they've only ever had each other for so long. It's easy to see how they became so close, and it's easy to see that in their dynamic here in this support. Okay, we can move on to Ewan, and finally we're into the characters that I actually fucking like in this episode. Okay, listen, I like Gerik well enough. I think Marisa's fine. I think Tethys is solid. But Ewan and Saleh, I like both of them quite a bit. Ewan supports with Tethys, Saleh, Dazla, Amelia, and Ross. Now, the Tethys support I've already talked about. I also already touched on how I think, it shows how, like, Ewan is very consistently sarcastic and quippy and kind of rude in a lot of his other supports. But I think the fact that he gets along so well with Tethys is really nice. You can also see that like he's still very much like a kid. I think he might be the youngest member of the army. I mean, he looks like he's about 10, maybe like 11 or 12. And he's like playing pranks on people who talk to his sister because he's jealous, and doesn't want his sister's attention to be given to other people, which is it's extremely childish. But that's, he's literally a kid, so like I think it fits and makes sense. And it's fun. I think it's a good support for Ewan's characterization. I'm trying to figure out where to go next here, because I think for the first time out of any of these supports, I think that out of all these characters that we've talked about so far, I think all of Ewan's supports really build on each other, and like you can take away like certain aspects of his character that are pretty interesting from both of them. I don't have a lot to say individually about the Ross or Amelia supports. I think that he gives off a similar vibe to me in both of them, which is that we can see through like his story dialogue and his supports with both Saleh and Tethys that he is very invested in being taken seriously as a mage. Like, he knows he still has a long way to go. He knows that he still, still isn't anything cracked up compared to his teacher. I mean, he even says that to Amelia. He's like, I'm nothing compared to my teacher, or something like that. But he also wants to be treated with respect. He doesn't want to be treated like a kid, and he wants to be recognized for what he can do. And Amelia and Ross, in them, he, obviously this is maybe leaking the mechanics into the story a little bit, but I think that, Ewan can probably, gets the vibe from these guys that they're just as inexperienced as he is. Like, they both give off the same vibe of, like, eager young kids, like, ready to prove themselves. And I think Ewan senses, how do I word this? I don't think he senses anything. I'm making it seem like Ewan is doing a whole lot of, like, high level insight. I don't think that at all. I think that Ewan, in his conversations with Ross and Amelia, has the opportunity to do cool shit for people who are, like, genuinely invested in what he has to do. And, like, he just has a good time doing that. Like, he impresses Ross with, like, a brain teaser, and he shows off some fun little magic doodads to Amelia, like, little, like, doing, like, prestidigitation and shit. And they're both, like, he has a good time going back and forth with Ross, obviously. And getting Ross to kind of respect his intellect. And Amelia, he seems very invested in Amelia, thinking that his magic is cool. I particularly like in his Amelia support how invested he becomes in showing Amelia the wonders of the world. That's not really something that comes up in most of his other supports, but I think he is such a wide-eyed, curious child that has seen a lot of really cool shit. How many kids, especially his age, can say that they're an apprentice to, like, a fucking master sage, right? And he's traveled around the world with Tethys, and he's traveled around the world with Gerik. And, like, I think that he has seen a lot of cool stuff, and he thinks that that's awesome, and he wants to share that experience with Amelia. And the pure, like, unbridled, childlike wonder, I don't know why it took me so long to think of that phrase. I throw it around all the time when I'm talking about dumb bullshit, and the first time that it actually is, like, relevant to something, meaningful, I can't find the words for it, but it really is that he's literally experiencing childlike wonder and wants to share that with Amelia, and I think that that's cool. I think that's a fun dynamic for them to have. I don't have anything specific to say about the Ross support, except that I think he's very fun in it. It is criminal that Ewan did not have a support with loot. I would have paid to read that support. Like, I like, both of them are magical prodigies. Both of them know a lot about magic. And they both are very, like, eager to, like, show off. And are both pretty arrogant in their respective ways. Like, both of them are kind of like brats. And I just think, like, seeing them butt heads over, like, which one of them is better at magic would be so fun. And I'm so disappointed that we didn't get to see that. I think that Dazla's support might actually be my favorite out of all of his. And it's pretty straightforward. Ewan starts talking to Dazla about, like, hey, I have some cool ideas for shit that would be awesome if it happened. And Dazla's, like, just, like, humoring him this whole time. Like, he goes on these, like, fanciful ideas about, wouldn't it be cool if we could, like, turn a dreary battlefield into a flower garden or something like that. And then in the beast support, he starts talking about, like, what if there was, like, a cool flying, like, a flying carriage, like if Pegasi could fly a carriage through the air. And then in the A support, he starts talking about a telephone, basically. And he just, like, has all these cool ideas. And he's clearly, like, he's like a very bright kid with a lot of creativity and imagination, but he's also smart enough to be like, yeah, I don't know if the Pegasus idea would work out. He's, like, he's thinking through these things rationally. He's not just, like, spewing dumb bullshit. He actually has these cool, interesting ideas that he's thinking logically about how they could be applied. And that's really awesome. And I just love to see him. I love to see him be passionate about stuff. And Dazla also loves to see him be passionate about stuff because he's over here like, man, little dude, that sounds awesome. Tell me more. Tell me more funny words, Magic Man. And that's great. I love Dazla in the support. I didn't realize that Dazla was built like this. I think that he's just like a really fun character, and I think his relationship with Ewan is really cute in the support. I don't have much else to add, but it was a really enjoyable read for me. And then finally, the Saleh support. We find out how they met. Ewan, I guess. So Tethys knew Gerik, and obviously Ewan was with Tethys. So when Saleh came to visit Gerik, who I guess Saleh already knew at that point, he followed him. Ewan followed Saleh all the way back to Cair Pelin, and asked to be Saleh's apprentice. And Saleh, kind of reluctantly said yes. Basically, Saleh says that Ewan's eyes had like the burning of a magical prodigy or something like that. He thought that Ewan would be good at the whole magic thing, and took him in for that reason, which is neat. What I like about this support more than anything, it doesn't stand out to me as being like one of his better supports. But what I do like about it is that it showcases a lot of different aspects of Ewan's personality, because they do get into him being a little shit, where he like stole something from Saleh, and ended up ruining it by dropping it in a river. And they talk about how, he learned from that experience, promise, cross my heart, hope to die, or whatever. And Saleh doesn't think that's entirely true, but, and they have a little back and forth about that. But then also Ewan is like genuinely eager to prove himself, but also respectful to Saleh as his teacher, as his mentor. And then we get to see how bright of a kid Ewan is, because Saleh is imparting all this sage wisdom into Ewan, and Ewan, like, stuff that's like hard to grasp, probably even for a lot of like adults. Saleh saying stuff like, what does he say? Yeah, so this is from the B support. Ewan, you can never find truth in words, spoken or unspoken. The truth lives within the heart. And then Ewan is like asking genuinely curious questions. He's trying to learn more from Saleh about like this life lesson that he's teaching. And then by the end, he has to ask some clarifying questions, but by the end, he starts to understand. It's a fairly like a fairly high level concept, and he's able to grasp it pretty easily, which I think just goes to show how smart of a kid he really is. So overall, I like Ewan a lot. I think that he's a really fun character. I haven't done the Amelia SSS, but I have a feeling that Ewan's going to come away as my favorite of the three trainees. I definitely like him a little bit more than Ross, and he's just like a fun guy. I enjoy him. I enjoy him quite a bit. Okay, finally, for today, we have Saleh, and Saleh supports with Mer, Ewan, Gerik, and Erica. Short list today. And we can immediately go through two of those. Gerik and Ewan, Saleh doesn't have a lot interesting to say, and this is kind of I'm gonna feel like a little bit of a hypocrite, especially in the same episode that we talked about Gerik, right? I did say that I liked Gerik, but he's not like one of my favorites or anything. I really like Saleh, despite the fact that Saleh is a little bit on the boring side, more than a little bit. I think he's actually very dull. He doesn't have a lot of interesting things to say. He tends to be very quiet, and doesn't have a lot of like strong personality traits that come through in these conversations. But what I like about Saleh is that he just seems like so... there's a certain vibe to Saleh that's hard for me to put into words. I'm going to try my best. It doesn't feel to me like Saleh is a boring or uninteresting person. Like, he doesn't seem like closed off or guarded or going out of his way to be stoic in the same way that characters like Gilliam or Marisa from this episode, the way that those characters are, pretty much seem to like have their walls up at all times. Saleh is more just like, he's a nice laid back guy who just happens to be quiet. He's pretty serious. He doesn't joke around a lot. But like, he can engage in pleasant conversation. He even has like some semblance of humor that we see with Gerik, where he kind of like leans into Gerik's joke a little bit. And that's just nice to see. I think Saleh is like, he's got like a fun vibe. I don't know why that works for me for some characters more so than others, but it does. And I think Saleh is a pretty cool guy. I like his mentorship with Ewan. You can tell that he is like very like he genuinely cares deeply about Ewan, even if he thinks that he is maybe a little bit of trouble sometimes. But he's obviously very invested in giving Ewan a good education, and helping Ewan to realize his maximum potential. I don't have a lot to say about the Mer support. I think I will. I will definitely have a lot to say about the Mer support when I get to Mer. But for now, I'm just gonna skip over it because I don't think it really says much about Saleh, other than similarly to with you, and he clearly has a lot of I think he has a soft spot for kids. That's the impression that I'm getting, because Mur, he treats Mur with a lot of respect, a lot of deference. But he is also just like, even beyond that, he seems genuinely invested in Mur being happy. And that's just nice to see. He seems sweet. He's a nice guy. And then finally, the Erica support. Now, for the longest time, I have always been an Erica and Seth stan. I think that Erica and Seth have the best relationship. Saleh, I think, gives him a run for his money. I do have one very negative thing about this. I mean, I guess I didn't say this explicitly, but Erica and Saleh have a romantic paired ending. Where Erica leaves Rene to go be with him in Kair Pelin. And that's where the issue that I have. I don't think that Erica should leave Rene. I think that her, like, being there for Rene, wanting, to help her people, to defend her people, is such a core part of her character that for her to just, like, leave that behind, is a little bit fucked up. And I don't like that this ending results in that happening. But on the other hand, I do like the two of them in the support a fair bit. I think both of them feel like genuinely invested in like getting to know the other person. Erica in particular seems very invested in learning more about the Kair Pelin culture. And Saleh, tells her the legend of a woman whose name is what did she say? What's her name? Nada Kuya. And Nanakuya was a warrior hero, warrior princess, who was a strong woman, beautiful and proud. She spoke with the voice of nature, and she lived at one with the earth. The interesting thing about this legend is that this is basically the only reference in this game to any sort of falchion type. So this actually doesn't come up at all in. Is this the first time that we're seeing a falchion, like, in this podcast? I think it actually might be. That's fucking weird, man, that it comes from the Saleh Erica support from Fire Emblem 8. But yeah, I guess so. So my understanding, and this, I don't know too much about the Arcanea lore, but my understanding is that the falchion, which is Marth's iconic sword, is forged from one of Naga's fangs. And that is like the origin story for its creation. It's also how the falchion from Gaiden and Shadows of Valentia is made. We actually see with like the falchion in Arcanea existed like way before the events of the game. We actually see the falchion, I think, being no, that's not true. I don't think it was like literally made in Gaiden, but it is something like that. I don't know. Anyway, the falchion's pretty cool. It's a cool weapon, and this is just like an homage to that, I guess. This is like one of the pieces of evidence that people try to use to link Fire Emblem 8 to some of the other games. Fire Emblem 8 is definitely, at least for a very long time, maybe not so much anymore, but for a very long time, Fire Emblem 8 was the hardest game to. If you were one of the people who theorized that all of the Fire Emblem games take place in one shared universe. Which is pretty easy to do for the first 7 games, because 1 through 5 canonically all take place in the same universe. That part's easy. And then 6 and 7, there's a very popular interpretation that the Dragon's Gate was a portal to Arcanea. And then, like, you can make some arguments about certain other, like, references to characters and other shit. Like, you have, like, a lot of the areas in Foldlin reference older Fire Emblem characters that you can argue maybe that has something to do with that. Fates. Okay, Fates maybe not. Fates probably is harder. But this is one of the things that people sometimes use to try to tie FE8 into the shared universe theory. But not a very strong evidence, if you ask me. It feels like more of a reference. But if you are a fan of the shared universe theory, I'm a fan of the shared universe theory. I don't have any fucking evidence for it, but I sure do think it's cool to think that they're in the same universe. If they're not, it is what it is, but, it's fine. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off topic. It's a cool legend, and what I like about this support for Erica especially, and not to delve too much into Erica, but I think it's a nice support for her because, like, Saleh is basically saying, like, hey, you remind me of this warrior princess, this brave, beautiful, kind hero from Kair Pellin's history, and Erica's like, no, that can't possibly be true. I can't see myself in this person at all because when Grotto invaded Renee, I couldn't do anything. I was terrified, and I was unable to help my people when they needed me the most. And Saleh turns around and says, well, what are you doing right now then? Like, you couldn't do anything immediately, but you almost immediately started fighting back against Grotto and helping your people anyway. So, like, I think it fits. And Erica feels really uplifted by that, which I think is just a nice moment for them. Saleh has a line in the ace support that I think is very interesting. And it ties into something that he mentions in just very briefly. It's like a one-off line in the first chapter where we meet him, or one of the first chapters where we meet him, which I believe it was Village of Silence was the chapter in question, where he talks a little bit about how Kair Pellin doesn't have any, like, they don't have a lot in the way of material wealth, but that makes them more in tune with nature, and they don't have anything fancy, and that's fine with them. They prefer it that way, and it makes them feel more enriched as people. And Saleh references that again in the ace support, where he says, we had nothing special, but because of that, we had everything. And Erica, for the first time, feels like that she can understand that. I wish that this, like, it feels like this is a little scattershot. I really do wish that they kind of just, like, picked I wish that they had just, like, taken this idea of Nadakuya and ran with it for the whole support chain. I think that would have been way more interesting than just squeezing it all into the B support. If, like, the C support and the B support kind of work with this, right? Like, C could be a little bit more fleshed out, but it's basically Erica expressing interest in, like, Kair Pellin's history and traditions. I wish that they, and then they could have started the process of her learning about Nadakuya. And then in the B support, Saleh and her could talk about Nadakuya a little bit. Basically, have the B support be what it is right now. Maybe cut it off a little bit earlier and have that support with Erica, like, not fully believing in herself. Because as it stands, she turns around on the idea a little bit too quickly, if you ask me. All it takes is, like, one line from Saleh, and it completely changes her point of view. And then the A support, I wish they had fleshed out a lot more, talking about, like, how Erica is, like, being doing the best that she can for her country right now, and how that makes her, like, a strong warrior, like the hero of legend. That would have been cool, but as it stands, it feels like they just had a couple ideas here that they didn't dig quite deep enough with, which is a shame. I do like the support a lot. I think Saleh is a good paired ending for Erica. Like, I like their relationship. I don't like that Erica leaves Renee. I think that that's dumb. I think any fucking what's it called? Any paired ending where she doesn't stay in Renee, or at least, like, isn't closely tied with Renee still, is dumb, and I don't like it. But I do like their dynamic. I think they have a cute relationship. So, a double-edged sword, I guess. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I think that, there's some decent characters in here. I think my favorite of the bunch this time was probably Ewan. I'm sure that probably came through in how I talked about a lot of supports. I do think that Saleh is a pretty close second. I like Saleh a fair bit. But Ewan, I think, takes the cake here overall. I think almost all of his supports were really fun to read and made me feel like, Ewan was this, like, really, really interesting, fleshed out character with a lot of different aspects to him that were fun to read. But yeah, that's all I had this time. Next SSS will be after the two main episodes that cover Ephraim's route. So we're not going to see any more for a bit for two main episodes. The next one, though, is going to include Dusel, Cormag, Noel, and Amelia. So that's going to be for the Grotto characters. And obviously the reason that we're doing that after Ephraim's route is so that we can get Noel in there. We got to squeeze Noel in there in the last second. Yeah, so that's all I have this time around. If you want to let me know who your favorite character this episode was, go ahead and tweet or blue sky at I'm Amelia Kirby, or email terminalpodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.